All right. Boss Rush Banter of the week. Boss Rush Banter is our daily discussion piece you can find on the Boss Rush website, bossrush.net. This one's a quick one, but I think it's an interesting discussion. So the banter is from Andrew Millard. Kinetsugami Path of the Goddess is a sight to behold. The reason why I chose this for this week's banter is because there does seem to be somewhat of a rise in the AA gaming experience, that $50 range game. We had Miles Morales a few years ago, Lost Legacy for Uncharted, and then you have stuff like Kinetsugami and some of these other games that are coming out. And, I think Flintlock is $50. And so my question is, are we going to see a resurrection of AA games? And if we are, how soon? Or at least that smaller experience, like a Miles Morales, because I wouldn't call that a AA game. I would just say it's a smaller experience. But, Adam, I'm going to go your way first.
Yeah, I mean, I took a lot of notes on this one because I was like, "This is actually pretty interesting." I think that AA games has already been a thing, and we're kind of already here, but we just have to think differently. Because I think a lot of us want to think back to, the early aughts. Is that what you call it? It's like before
the game I always circle as a AA game is Darksiders. That's like the quintessential AA.
I was actually thinking of THQ before Embracer. So you think about your Nickelodeon tie-in games, your whatever. Everyone thought of that as a THQ made AA games, right? And then THQ obviously went under. But I think it was just large indies became, excuse me, not large indies, large independents, right? Because everyone thinks of an indie game, it's these 5 dudes in a garage or whatever. But there's a lot of independent developers which are bigger than that, which I think is what is making that space. So just for example, Liza P came out last year. Souls Light Replay Pinocchio did very well. People liked it. Got some nominations and stuff. That game was made by, I was looking at the Wikipedia. Here we go. Started as 60 people, team expanded to 100 people. You wouldn't say a team of 60 people is an indie, they're in their garage. But you also wouldn't say that's Ubisoft with 1,000 employees across 10 studios, right? So to me, that says, looks like the AA space. That game also wasn't, I don't know if it was full price, but it's a day one Game Pass game. I feel like if you get these games made by 20 to 100 people, not at maybe full price on a subscription service, I feel like that's feeling what AA used to mean. Yeah. Right? Because you do have your indies made by one person. Inscription, amazing game. I would say that qualifies as indie, not AA. But then again, you have a lot of studios not owned by one of the big guys, but are, still sizable, making a lot of those really good games that, are getting recognition, coming out to multiple consoles, not just on PC. I think that is the new AA space. I think we just have to change our mind that SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom doesn't have to mean AA anymore. It can be Flintlock. It can be Lies of P. It can be anything from Focus Entertainment, The Surge or stuff like that. I think that's the new AA. So I think we've had it. We just had to change the way we normally would think a AA game is.
Yeah. The big example for me the last year or so is also the Plague Tale games. Those games are
perfect example.
Awesome, but AA experiences for sure. Nick, what do you think?
I agree with everything that Adam said. I think he hit the nail right on the head when it comes to our perception of AA. I kind of look at it from a standpoint of less of kind of it's like a combination of the public perception versus what actually exists right now. What are the games today? And Corey, you had mentioned previously Uncharted Lost Legacy or Spider-Man Miles Morales. I would never, I would struggle feeling comfortable characterizing those as AA experiences because they're coming from first party developers. I look at those games like DLC that just spiraled out of control and they became bigger projects than they were initially scoped for. And then so they got their own game, right?
Yeah,
and they
maybe calling those AA was really the wrong thing.
Right. And either way, I think when I think about AA, I do think about, shorter experiences, more contained, focused experiences, the kind of party that, the normal fare that you're going to get on Game Pass. Like, and it's weird too, because indies, obviously we talked about how like indies are occupying the space of like how we would characterize a AA experience. But when you think about a game like Stray from Annapurna, like they have a lot of tech behind that, and they have a lot of like very talented developers that are working on that, and they're very well funded. And then there was like a whole conversation that came out, I don't know if it was earlier this year on Twitter, I mean, time doesn't really matter, but like there was this whole argument on what was considered, I think it like happened last year when they put what was it, the fishing
Dave the
game.
Diver.
They put Dave the Diver in the indie category, and people were like, hold on, it's from Nexon, it's not indie, right? So it's like sometimes we have to kind of like juggle in the air what we want to arbitrarily characterize as, hey, this is an indie experience, hey, this is a AA experience. But I agree with you. I feel like, when you look at games like Kinitsugami, Path of the Goddess, or if you're looking at a Flintlock Siege of Dawn, if you're looking at more recent Game Pass offerings, those are really valid, worthwhile experiences that I feel like people not only have the opportunity to play, but really should play, so they can expand the breadth of their flavor profile when it comes to playing video games, period. So it's like, seeing a resurrection of it, I just, I don't know. Like, I would love to see more of stuff like Sea of Stars, but are we going to call that AA, or are we going to call that indie? Is where I start, kind of wondering. It's like, because 505 Games and Remedy Studios, they're a third party publisher. Are we going to call Control a third party, a AA game? Or are we going to call Alan Wake 2? Certainly, I would not call Alan Wake 2 a AA experience, but I feel like somebody could make the argument for it if they really wanted to.
I'd say team size and budget. Like, I think that's, you point to team size and budget, and you could determine, what you think it would be.
100%. Agree with you there.
Pat, you've been quiet.
Honestly, my opinion matches right up with Adam and Nick. I don't think the term AA game is really, like, if you asked me this 3 years ago, I would have said certainly, because then you had the Miles Morales, you had the Uncharted Lost Legacy. But I feel like the bigger publishers said, you know what, we rather focus on the AAA games right now, is what they wanted to move to. So I feel like in their interpretation, AA is no longer going to exist. So something else is going to fill that vacuum, and I believe that's going to be indie developers. They're going to be making, some, like, we're already seeing some good stuff from indie developers that are, like, around the quality of, like, a good, like, as long as they're funded well, they're going to make a good quality game, like, say, maybe Deathbound, or Lies of P, it's...
Yeah.
And these are the ones that are going to make these slightly more cheaper games, but shorter experience.
And you get into like interesting situations, like when you look at games like Octopath Traveler 2 versus a Sea of Stars. Octopath Traveler, a game published by Square Enix, but it's like, I almost think about like AA experiences as more of a niche genre. Like, like, I don't know, Adam, you're a huge offensive coordinator, college football fan. Would you call like, Madden NFL, like, head coaching the video game? I don't even know if they make those games anymore. I feel like they don't. But
no,
like,
they haven't since 2009, believe me, I know.
But like, I would say that fits squarely in like the genre of being a AA experience. Same thing with like Roller Drome, from 505 Games. Yeah, it's like, those are all kind of like walking that line. And even going deeper than that, you think about like scope and size, funding, and the size of like the development team. Pentiment from Obsidian, a first party Xbox game, but at its core, really a AA title.
Yeah. AA scope, but AAA studio.
Yeah.
Kind of an idea.
Hi-Fi Rush 2 and Psychonauts 2, like Xbox, like we've had this discussion a couple times on other podcasts, but like Xbox seems to be, they have the AA space filled out for Game Pass, right? Like with well, I guess not Hi-Fi Rush anymore, but those types of experiences, and Grounded, and Psychonauts 2, and they have that, they kind of have that space figured out a little bit. It's the AAA problem that they're having. But
yeah, when are they going to have their Last of Us moment? When are they going to have their God of War moment?
Yeah,
is what you keep waiting for, because Halo Infinite wasn't it. I don't know if Indy's going to be it. I would like it to be, but I just don't think it will be.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens over the course of the next year with them. But I feel like people lost sight of the AA experience when the rise of indies. I mean, indies exploded. I mean, even after Xbox Live Arcade went away, like the rise of indies just kept going and going and going. I mean, you look at Braid to N Plus to Shovel Knight to Axiom Verge, and these huge indies in like the mid 2010s or whatever. And then now every other day a new indie is coming out that's like exploded onto the scene. I mean, Pat, you and Stephanie played Animal Well, and that like took over our Discord for like 2 or 3 weeks, Animal Well. And it's just, that made by one guy plus
one
like,
guy did the entire thing.
Yeah. And it's like, it's nuts how the rise of indies kind of almost killed the AA space, not because AA games weren't coming out, but people have just gravitated towards these indie experiences. And now that the indie experiences are growing past the, pixelated Metroidvania platformer every other game, like they're growing into that PS1 and 64 space. I mean, what was that one kind of Resident Evil 1
Crow
PS1?
Country?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like those types of games are starting to come out of indie studios. And I think the way we have to look at indie games also has to change as we go into looking at AA experiences too. And Adam, like you said, scope, budget, who's publishing it, who's that kind of thing. But there's a lot of great AA games out there. I'm glad I got to like rediscover a lot of these because honestly because of Game Pass. And Evil West is one
perfect example.
That's
AA as hell.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I'm like, man, I would never pay $50 for that game, but it came to Game Pass. I'm like, yes, let's kill some
Pretty sure that's a
vampires.
focus.
Yeah, I think it is.
So.
Yeah, my co-host Will all the time talks about the necessity of 7 out of 10 games. And any game from like AAA to like very, very like one person team indie game can be a 7 out of 10. But most often what you see occupying that space of what we would typically characterize as like a AA is like a Biomutant or like a, Atomic Heart, these games that are interesting in their own right. Maybe not the best experience that you've ever had, but still worthwhile. I think like what's a little bit tricky about it as we move forward is that now that we're in the video game space, like publishers and developers both are in this like frame, and like the industry has shifted so rapidly from people buying, consuming during COVID, and now we're back to work, right? And we're not consuming as much, we're not streaming as much, and you see all of these tech companies, losing stock price, falling off. I mean, there are people talking about we're in a recession right now. That's not necessarily related specifically to the video game space, but the point is that you see that publishers these days have a much less, like they have a much lower risk profile, a much lower risk tolerance for wanting to put forward, I don't know, what is it, like what would you say, like $1 million to a development budget for somebody to put together a AA title that could potentially garner some type of accolades at BAFTAs or maybe the Game Awards at the end of the year, but most likely won't have that developer space. I think that's what's tricky, is that unless you're marketing and you're pitching your experience as a core indie title that's geared and your targeted demographic are indie fans, then you have a space where you can get funding for that game. But then otherwise, like, you're going to be making a third person action open world adventure RPG experience.
Yep.
Yeah. Last point I'll say is that when you think about what AA, indie, whatever is, I would think just random math, not actual math. There's only maybe 30 actual AAA games a year. We're talking about like $100 million budget. I mean, you've got what Ubisoft puts out, what EA puts out, what the console makers put out, whatever the other Rockstar, where 2K puts out, right? That's really all the only true, like, if it's getting a commercial on Monday Night Football, that is a AAA game.
Yeah. If it's on a
so
bag
there's
of
really
Doritos,
not that much in that. There's not a lot in that space, really. So
yeah,
we just got to figure out, or they need to figure out the money to make things that are not to that budget, because most people cannot succeed in that business. So
yeah,
there's a lot more below that.
If you want to see how you can become a Patreon producer, head on over to patreon.com/BossRushNetwork. The Patreon producers for this month are Adriel Munger, Austin Campbell, Celeste Roberts, Christian S., Sana Dierig, Francisco Santillan, Matthew Keel, and Todd Oxtra. Thanks for your continued support of the Boss Rush Network.